Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up first, let's see, right to satellite imagery, and you can see a band of moisture extending from southwest to northeast, pushing into the southern and central southeast coast today, bringing some pretty good rainfall into the southern areas after a week or more of dry conditions. And then a little more showery and lighter precipitation up to the north, where the clouds are a little bit darker there. And over south central Alaska, mostly cloudy skies. There was some clearing. It was definitely a drier day than yesterday and overnight last night over many areas, including the North Gulf Coast. But some pretty good moisture moving up over areas of the eastern interior over toward the Canadian border. And then we've got high pressure building out over the western Bering Sea, and that's allowing a system to drop down the coastline. You can see just to the east-northeast of St. Paul Island there, and that'll bring kind of an increase in the winds once that gets south of the area, and we'll have some pretty good northerly winds. They're already blowing pretty good through the Bering Strait all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula area with gusts of 36 miles an hour at Tin City this afternoon, or during the day today, a peak wind gust there, and about 30 to 35 miles an hour over the Pribilofs on down to the Alaska Peninsula. And that'll probably increase a little bit here once that system drops southward and that high pressure begins to push a little to the east. Otherwise, on the chart today, again, Ketchikan picked up about 3/4 of an inch of rain during the day today. And up to the north, though, Eagle had about almost half an inch of rain with some pretty good showers there. There were a couple of lightning strikes in the Copper River Basin there, so dropped the thunderstorm symbol there. And otherwise, drier day over south central Alaska, scattered showers mostly over the mountainous terrain, and some shower activity all the way back to the southwest coast into Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula with that weak low in over the southwest part of the state there. And drying out, though, over the western Aleutians, big area, clear skies out there, sunshine the entire day at Adak and Atka back toward Kiska Island. High pressure out there. Warm front starting to move through that ridge. You can see just coming onto the chart, and it'll weaken as it does. Also tend to weaken the high ridge there, which should stay dry and mostly clear for the central Aleutians and unsettled for the Alaska Peninsula. And windy conditions start to diminish through the Bering Strait coast, but will continue quite windy down across the Pribilofs and the eastern Aleutians and western Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, front there kind of comes northward, the bulk of the moisture heading in toward the southern panhandle with the jet stream to the south, but still occasional light rain, fog, drizzle, North Gulf Coast. Not too bad, may be mostly dry from northern Cook Inlet to the Susitna Valley and the big portion of the western interior there with some scattered showers up over the northwest part of the state, which are a little more numerous with that trough over the northeast part of the interior down to the eastern Alaska Range. And then for let's see, tomorrow, band of moisture, there's some question now whether that's going to make it up to the North Gulf Coast or not. It should be a day much like today over south central Alaska, just some showers mostly over the Alaska Range and the Copper River Basin, Talkeetna. There's risk of a thunderstorm. Risk of thunderstorms also up over the mid and upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country there, especially over the White Mountains. And periods of rain over the southern southeast coast, a little lighter now, with the next front starting to move in there, and showers to the northern panhandle with still breezy conditions, eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. And the outlook for Monday dries out over the western interior. That high pressure ridge moves eastward right to near or just off the coast. So Fox Islands will be dry, just some maybe drizzle and fog there as that weakening warm front trailing edge of that drags across the central Aleutians. And then maybe a little rain with a cold front that isn't all that strong out over the western Aleutians, but more rain, moderate to heavy over the southern southeast coast. And then probably a better chance of some rain making it up to the North Gulf Coast there, but it looks like south central Alaska, Susitna Valley, maybe the Manuska Valley, mostly dry day on Monday. Definitely out west it'll be that. And it's really the showers will be restricted to the mountainous terrain or right over the mountains like the Talkeetnas. Right over the Talkeetnas, chance of a shower. Otherwise looking pretty good. Lows tonight in the 50s for the Panhandle and mostly in the 40s over the remainder of southern Alaska. Kodiak Island near 50. Highs tomorrow into the mid-60s. Susitna Valley, maybe a degree or two warmer down around Big Lake. But anyway, in the lower 60s for the Kenai Peninsula, upper 50s for Valdez, Seward, near 60 for Yakutat, and lower to mid-60s southern Panhandle, upper 50s to the north, near 60 Kuskokwim Valley, and 60, 65 for Bristol Bay, followed by lows 39 at Gulkana, otherwise in the 40s, lower 50s, or in the 50s for the southeast coast. Highs 65 to 70 for the southern Panhandle Monday afternoon. Otherwise, mid-60s, Susitna, Manuska Valley, down into the Kenai Peninsula, near 60 in the Copper River Basin, upper 50s, Kuskokwim Valley, lower 60s for Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, up to the north, 30s, North Slope Arctic Coast for the lows, 40s over the central and southern interior, except upper 30s, Bering Strait Coast to St. Lawrence Island, highs 60 to 65, eastern interior, 40s out along the Bering Sea coast and up along the Arctic coast, and then lows Monday morning, 40s in the interior, 39 Ambler and 30s all the way out to the Arctic coast, followed by highs again in the lower to mid 60s for the eastern interior, cooling into the 50s as you head west, upper 40s St. Lawrence Island, and out to the southwest, mid 40s for the Pribilofs, 40s most everywhere over the Bering Sea, upper 30s for St. Lawrence Island. Highs, 50s right along the coastline, lower 50s for the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, upper 50s for Adak, and for the lows, about the same, 40s most areas. And highs in the lower to mid-50s. Adak may push 60 degrees. Otherwise, lower 60s for Bristol Bay and 50 to 55 there for the Alaska Peninsula. 50 to 55 along the southwest coast. Upper 40s for Savunga and Gamble to near 50 for Nome. And you can see as you head east there, getting away from that onshore flow, it keeps a little cooler along the coastline. Temperature will push up to maybe near 60 in the Kuskokwim.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Marginal VFR in the central North Slope, eastern Arctic coast, surrounded by an area of IFR, extending down to the Brooks Range. South of the mountains there, though, VFR. Got some marginal VFR lingering along the Alaska Range and in the Copper River Basin down to the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle, mostly IFR. And not too bad out over the Bering Sea, some IFR along the southwest coast, northern Seward Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, a little bit in the Alaska Peninsula, VFR Adak, or about Atka almost, westward to Kiska, and then lowering conditions with the next system coming in to the western Aleutians. And for the afternoon, risk of a thunderstorm over the Talkeetnas and also up over the eastern interior over the mountainous terrain. Otherwise, pretty good. VFR. Some marginal VFR lingers over the Alaska Range, central and west side. Bristol Bay becoming VFR, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, Manuska Valley, maybe at times, but marginal VFR, central eastern Copper River Basin. Improvement there, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast of VFR. Some IFR lingers over the southern Panhandle, otherwise marginal there. And increasing IFR way out west there in the western Aleutians with marginal VFR, eastern Bering Sea, northward to the Arctic coast, where it becomes mostly marginal VFR until you get over toward Barter Island, Kaktovik. And Monday morning, narrow band of IFR through the west central interior there. Looks like right along the Kuskokwim Mountains, northeastward into the Koyukuk Valley, and then across the eastern Arctic coast, North Slope Brooks Range. A little band extending down the mountains there over the White Mountains. And some marginal VFR again lingers along the Alaska Range, maybe the Talkeetnas. IFR trying to push up. It should maybe from Kachemak Bay into at least southern Prince William Sound to the eastern North Gulf Coast, but VFR, most of south central Alaska, and IFR and marginal VFR for the Panhandle, and not too bad out in the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, areas of marginal VFR, areas of VFR, but a solid area of IFR from Amchitka Island westward. And for the afternoon, that area kind of splits up. One branch swings into the Pribilofs. Otherwise, marginal VFR for the Aleutians to the western Alaska Peninsula. IFR shimmying at 2. VFR, though, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, much of southern Alaska. That area of IFR now pushing up into Turnagain Arm and northward well into the Coast Range, covering Prince William Sound to the east side of Kodiak Island, and the southern 2/3 or so, or southern half of the Panhandle IFR, northern half marginal, good VFR interior Alaska, but some IFR up there over the Kobuk, western Koyukuk valleys, northward to the eastern Arctic coast, or the central Arctic coast, eastern Arctic coast looks VFR. And a Tuvik IFR tomorrow, same forecast for Adigan, mostly IFR, marginal VFR for Lake Clark and Merrill at times, rainy, marginal at times, windy, also marginal at times. Isabel, marginal VFR, improving to VFR mostly in the afternoon. And Mentesta should be a VFR day there, possible marginal VFR southern approach. And for Tanita, marginal VFR trending toward VFR. And Portage, same thing. Marginal VFR becomes VFR, possibly by midday through the afternoon. And Chilkoot and White, IFR, freezing levels 6,000 feet right over all of mainland Alaska until you get into the central Bering Sea. Then it runs from 8 to as high as 16,000 feet out toward Chimney and Attu, about 8,000 feet over the Panhandle. Icing, areas of isolated moderate rime or mixed icing possible anywhere across the interior tomorrow from the eastern Bering Sea into the northern Panhandle, Kodiak Island, north to the Arctic coast. And for the jet stream, big trough right over the longitude of the state of Alaska there, and northerly jet over the central Bering Sea, 130 to 155 knots, and it goes down off the map, back onto the map, south-southwest, turn westerly across the southern Panhandle at about 100 knots. And for 9,000 feet, northerly winds up to 40 knots over the Aleutians, pretty light everywhere else over the mainland areas, and then the Panhandle about 30 to 40 knots out of the west-southwest over the southern areas. And 3,000 feet, pretty light winds here, even over the southeast coast. Eastern Bering Sea, we've got those northerlies at about 30 to 35 knots there from near St. Lawrence Island down across Nunivak Island into the eastern Aleutians. Then a ridge over the west central Aleutians. But pretty light winds even for the Arctic coast down in the Gulf of Alaska. Turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop along the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, considerable moderate chop from Alaska Peninsula to Atka Island. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
You guys got everything tied down back there? Yeah. Yep. We're going through the lee of St. Elias, so there might be some turbulence.
Fasten seatbelt sign on.
Well, who am I to tell you what to do?
There are tens of thousands of glaciers in Alaska. Some stunning cliffhangers, others wide glaciers that come down to meet the ocean tides. Some, like this one we flew over in August, are easily visible from low Earth orbit and are mesmerizing from 1,000 feet above and have trees growing on top of their soil-laden boundaries. Those glaciers, although they represent only a fraction of the world's ice, are contributing much more than their share to sea level rise. Chris Larson and his colleagues have repeatedly measured 220 of them in a small single-engine otter, measuring their height with lasers and their depth with radar, and watching them change from season to season and year to year. But Alaskan glaciers are also different. We're only just figuring out how they all behave. Data from flights like these, part of NASA's Operation Icebridge, can help fill the gaps. Chris and radar specialist Martine Trufer are both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and both seasoned Alaskan pilots. but they rely on their good friend and legendary bush pilot Paul Kloss and his 35,000 hours in the cockpit to fly the incredibly demanding flight lines the mission requires.
And does it help you guys being pilots too?
I would like to think so, but watching Paul fly and seeing what he does, it's kind of like trying to learn quantum mechanics in kindergarten.
You know, I can fly my airplane around, but just seeing what Paul does in this extremely challenging environment in the mountains while trying to follow a specific flight line at a specific altitude above ground, negotiating winds, topography, maybe occasional low-level clouds that you have to get around, and just managing all that is just several levels above what I could do as a pilot.
Well, I think the first time I came here to this park, I was probably 4 years old with my father. I've been blessed to be able to fly in lots of places in the world, all over the place actually, almost every continent. I guess I'm always looking for some place that might be better than this, but I haven't found it.
Paul's plane is about 60 years old and is the first single-engine otter ever retrofitted with a 1,000 horsepower engine, which makes takeoffs feel effortless and gives Paul the ability to negotiate wild terrain, which he certainly did during the first 2 incredible science flights of this campaign. And with sunny skies and relatively calm air, we covered 3 vastly different pieces of ice. While Paul fueled up the plane, Chris gave us a preview of the day's science and scenery.
So it has one of the greatest coastal reliefs anywhere in the world. So it's between the ocean and the summit of Mount St. Elias, which is 18,008 feet high. It's less than 10 miles. There's a stupendous amount of mountain right off the ocean. It's hard to beat it anywhere in the world. It might be the prettiest for me. It's absolutely stunning. From here in McCarthy, we'll cross one of the bigger precipitation gradients in Alaska too. Here it's about 10 inches of precipitation a year, and we'll go over to an area where it's on the order of 200 inches per year. So it's from one of the driest parts of Alaska to one of the wettest parts of Alaska in about 45 minutes flight time.
Whoa, that's pretty good.
That's awesome. You want to do Tyndall next?
Sure, where are you on?
If the winds are calm now, might as well grab it.
First, we came to the rugged landscape of Icy Bay, which not that long ago wasn't a bay at all. It was filled with ice. Tidewater glaciers in this region can make dramatic advances and retreats as they feed on high rates of snowfall and then retreat as they're melted by warm ocean waters. Like the Tyndall Glacier seen here, most of these glaciers have retreated dramatically over the last 100 years. But nearby Yahtzee Glacier, after years of retreat, is currently the most rapidly advancing glacier in Alaska. Overall, though, the Icebridge Alaska surveys, from the Denali region in the north to the Juneau ice field in the southeast, have documented pretty substantial thinning of glacial ice. Areas seen here in orange and red show between about 10 and 15 feet of thinning per year.
1,200.
There's a nice waterfall up there from the hanging ice.
When we very first started profiling this, Paul, this gravel fan in the one in the valley next to it didn't exist.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
this was
look
deep.
at all the good landing spots here.
Yeah,
There's no place to land here before.
no, it was deep water.
After covering several of Icy Bay's glaciers, given that it was time for lunch, just like that, we landed in this unforgettable spot. Flying eastward, leaving Icy Bay behind, we came to the mighty Malaspina, one of the Earth's great examples of a Piedmont glacier that spills out like pancake batter onto a broad plain as it approaches the sea. It surges at uneven intervals, creating dramatic patterns on its surface as it distorts the moraines of rock and soil borne along by the glacier. The Malaspina is less dynamic than the Yahtzee and is only melting at about the average rate for Alaska. But that could change quickly.
It has the potential for being one of the bigger geographic evolutions in Alaska. Certainly my son will be able to witness some big geography changes there. There's potential for it being connected with the ocean through some narrow lagoons, estuaries, which would take a little bit of coastal erosion, but it's not too hard to imagine that where the Malaspina Glacier is now could become a large bay.
The data that Martine's radar provides could reveal how vulnerable the Malaspina is to melting by the nearby ocean. Here we see the radar returns from the surface of the glacier, and here is something that Chris's lasers can't see, the rocky bed of the glacier, giving us both clues as to what's happening under the ice, as well as a measurement of its thickness. Finally, we came to the Yakutat ice field, 300 square miles of absolutely doomed ice perched high in the mountains. Researchers even debate how this ice field came to be at all, since in its current configuration, it's hard to imagine how it could capture enough snow to form glacial ice. And so, even if the Arctic weren't warming faster than the rest of the planet, this area would be likely to melt within a century or two. But with many other glaciers, it's easier to see the connection between a warming planet and ice loss. Thanks to data from IceBridge and other surveys, we now have a good estimate of the current rate of loss from Alaskan glaciers, 75 gigatons a year. While airborne observations over Alaskan glaciers have provided a rich record of change in the area, those efforts are now augmented by NASA's newest ice measuring tool, ICESat-2. With 6 laser beams of its own, and orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, the satellite will carry on the record of Alaskan change. For their part, Chris and his team will continue to do their surveys for at least the next 2 years, helping to validate the ICESat-2 data and make further detailed observations over the stunning glaciers of Alaska.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And today's sea ice analysis, it's just about ready, it looks like, to pull off the coast there and be sea ice free all along the coastline. But still, that area there on the east side that's down right to the Barrier Islands and back to the west a little bit, so I have to wait a little bit longer. And from there, going to the marine forecasts, small craft advisories for the coast out along the outer coastline. For the south coast, southeast winds 25 knots, and the north coast, east-southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas 7 to 9 feet. Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, northern inner channel, south winds at 10 knots, southeast 15 for Stevens Passage, southern inside waters, Clarence Strait, south at 15 knots. Southeast winds 20 knots for Clarence Strait on Monday, and for Stevens Passage, southeast winds 15 knots, northern inside waters, south winds at 15 knots. And not much change out along the coast. Continue with the small craft advisory wind speeds, about south to southeast 25 knots with 8 to 10 foot seas. Prince William Sound, northeast winds 10 knots, and the North Gulf Coast, east-northeast winds at 20 knots with 5 foot seas. Variable winds at 20 knots for the Barren Islands, and light variable winds for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, north breeze 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 to 4 feet. Monday, even lighter winds for Cook Inlet, north to northeast or so, or variable to northeast at 10 knots. Northwest 15-knot winds there for Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories now for the Barren Islands, north winds 25 knots. East-northeast winds 25 knots for the North Gulf Coast, and northeast winds 15 knots for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, north to northeast winds on Sunday at 15 knots. Small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula with northwest winds at 25 knots. Bristol Bay, winds will be lighter there out of the north at 15. And then they pick up to 20 knots from the northwest as seas build to 6 feet for Bristol Bay on Monday. No change for the Alaska Peninsula. Small craft advisories for northwest winds at 25 knots. That extends up to Sitkinak. And Kodiak Island, north to northwest winds 15 to 25 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots, central Aleutians, northwest at 20. And for the far western Aleutians, Kiska to Shimia, southwest winds 20 knots. And for Monday, small craft advisories for the western Aleutians, southwest winds 25 knots. For the central Aleutians, southwest 20 to 25 knot winds with seas up to 7 feet. Eastern Aleutians, west to northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, seas 5 to 7 feet. Southwest coast, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots. Pribilofs, northwest winds 25 knots. St. Matthew Island, north winds 25 knots. And St. Lawrence Island, north winds at 25 knots. And for Norton Sound, that'll be where the winds are a little lighter, but they're still north at about 20. And for Monday, north winds 15 knots in Norton Sound. Then swinging around to the south there for St. Lawrence Island at 15 knots. Bigger increase, though, along the Yukon Delta coast and St. Matthew Island, south winds 30 knots. And for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, northwest winds at 25 knots, southwest 25 for the Pribilof Islands. Up along the Arctic coast, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, kind of a light variable wind pattern going there with anywhere from east to north winds at 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. Western Arctic coast, even a lighter, more variable wind pattern there, almost no wind at all. And for the western Arctic coast, northwest winds 15 knots, and from Cape Thompson to Wales, northwest winds at 20 knots. Outlook for Monday, Wales to Cape Thompson, northwest winds at 20 knots, and then 5 to 10 knot winds for the western Arctic coast from the north and northwest. East winds 15 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, with the seas forecast to run 2 to 3 feet. For tonight, low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, and then a wave along that frontal boundary there will push another round of moderate, maybe briefly heavy rain in toward the southern southeast coast, with conditions a little lighter and more showery up to the north, but periods of light rain and fog along the North Gulf Coast, and just scattered showers south central Alaska, especially the farther south you are over the Kenai Peninsula and along the eastern Alaska Range, but you can see drying out Kuskokwim Valley back to the coastline there, and some shower activity up over the northeast interior to the eastern Arctic coast. And for tomorrow, maybe a little overdone in that rain for Sunday there, coming up to the North Gulf Coast, but it'll be drier than today probably, hopefully. Risk of a thunderstorm over the Talkeetna Mountains in the afternoon, otherwise just scattered showers mostly over the Alaska Range mountainous terrain of south central Alaska. Also up over the interior, drier and windier out to the west, and more rain in the Panhandle for Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.